Thank you very much, Nicole. So again, a very warm welcome to today's lecture. And basically, I will teach part of my lecture of human resource management. The one is focused on learning and development because I thought it fits very nicely to teach you or to show you at the same time how we approach teaching at CalU and what we did. And so before I jump into the topic, I would like to first of all, I do have remote control, so that should work. Okay, to introduce myself. So I'm Associate Professor of Human Resource Management since 2 years at CalU. Before, I've been doing my PhD and also a habilitation at the Technical University of Munich. I originally studied industrial engineering in Karlsruhe, and in between, I've been working for 3 years as a consultant of the Boston Consulting Group, to gain some industry experience and also some work experience in between. I also spent the time, so also during my studies, I spent 1 year studying Barcelona. I've also did an internship in Shanghai. Also, now while being a researcher, I very much enjoy the opportunity to travel and to work with people around the world. So during my education, I did research stays abroad in New York and Hong Kong, and I also continue to do this, which I think is a very nice thing that you can do as an academic. And actually, with that, I'm coming directly to the situation that we faced in mid of March. Because I was just coming back actually 1 week before from a research day in New York. I've been there for a couple of weeks, so when I went there, there was nothing about Corona yet. It was not dangerous to go there. And then I came back. It was already a little bit spooky at the airport. And until the last minute, I had hoped that I could see at least my students for the first 1 or 2 lectures, to get to know them personally, to introduce myself, to get a better understanding of them. But then actually we had on Wednesday, we had our Zoom introduction. There we still hoped to see our students. And then on Friday it was clear, okay, this won't be possible because we were simply not allowed to do so. So we had to switch completely online. And so Monday, 8:30, I had my first lecture. And actually the picture that you see here, I did for my bachelor course, which was the Monday morning 8:30 first lecture course. I also been teaching in the master program and also in the MBA program. So we switched the whole program immediately and directly to the online setting. It was for me a little bit, I mean, the situation I think we all experienced, it's something, it was a very high uncertainty. It was not common. We didn't know what would happen next, etc. And so it was actually my task or role was to teach and to be there for my students and to prepare my lectures in the best way, hopefully, in the setting. And so coming from New York, I saw this as going to new skills and developing new skills for all of us. You did the Mentimeter at the beginning, and I think it was the really same situation for everyone to get these new skills. Of course, we will try to, so we won't switch over to online teaching. We want to teach in person because we think that this seeing each other, having everybody from around the world in a very international atmosphere, interactive classes and lectures is of very high value, and we value it, I think, even more than before. But it's also good to have developed these skills and to be flexible and to cope with whatever situation will come. And so with that, I will jump directly into learning and development as soon as my remote control allows me. Okay, here we go. So a first thing, teaching online was to work even more with learning objectives, because when you sit for 3 hours in front of an online lecture, it's really helpful to have some structure and to understand, okay, what will be today the most important things to learn and to be guided. And so, for example, for learning, so for today, learning objectives would be to understand the relevance of learning and development. So why is it important for organizations to know which kind of formats organizations are using, and then finally also to identify current trends in learning, because I don't want to teach the way things are. I also want to give my students the opportunity and the understanding of what will be coming next and what will be the next important things in organizations. And I mean, we see that currently, how dramatically things are changing for organizations. And so I think it's even more important now to always think a little bit about the future and think, okay, what is coming next? And so coming to the learning and development, first of all, training has a positive effect on organizational performance. Then also, this is because we do have different ways or different parts of knowledge. So on one hand, we have explicit knowledge, which is well documented and easily articulated. We can forward this. We can just codify it, we can write it down, and people can read it and understand it. But then, that is even more important, we have implicit knowledge. So this is really difficult to just write it. So for example, in our teaching at KLU, the explicit knowledge is something that I can bring into online lectures and into the recordings, and where I can make short videos for you and you can watch them. But then the implicit knowledge is how to work with it, how to adapt it to different situations. And there you need discussion, for example. So it's not so easy to codify it. And therefore we need in our lectures, the parts where I'm just telling you what it is. And then we also need the interactive part. We need our students to work with the topics, to really understand the topics, and then also to give us the opportunity to teach the more implicit knowledge that is also there. And then finally, organizations need to acquire new knowledge and change capabilities. That is also coming directly back to the Corona situation, but also to important topics like, for example, the digital transformation, where we see that, take for example, BMW as an organization, they are building cars, but they are no longer a traditional car manufacturer. They need people who understand electronics, who understand IT. They are actually competing for the same talents as Microsoft and Google. And that is a dramatic change for an organization. And also the question, how can they build up these resources and these competencies, which is part of hiring people, but on the other hand, also creating new knowledge within the organization. And that is why learning and development is so crucial. So we already talked about the first point. The next one, I would also like to do a Mentimeter with you, as I did, I think, in every single lecture that I gave during the Corona situation. So for today, I would like to know from you, which formats for employee development do you know? And so while you are hopefully answering, the question, I would like to elaborate a little bit on why we use Mentimeters. I also actually used them before in my classes. And we use them because they help you to activate. You have to think about something. You start to make your own thoughts about a topic. And so you start thinking about it. And then afterwards, we talk about the content. And so it's always easier for you, for your learning, if you already started to think about things and then to get additional information. So it's meant to be very helpful. And I felt that especially in these 3 hours of just watching, just sitting in front of the screen, not having another social component, it was even more helpful to keep attention up and to keep focused. And we now already have the first answers. So what do we see here? We have seminars, we have training, coaching, conversation, we have workshop, orientation, schooling, conferences, courses, blogs. That is already a new one. So I'm coming back to the blogs later. Further education is flying in. And just waiting for the last answers. It was actually a common experience that the moment that I wanted to start about the Mentimeters, they flipped again and changed the picture. So what we see, we have seminars, coaching, training as kind of the central blocks. Also races, we have feedback, which I very much like, because that is also one part of training that we very often forget. Learn holiday, yes, it's also very important. And people first of all, to relax, but then also to build up different competencies, certificates, conversation. So you already do have some of the blocks that we have. And so looking into what we have on a very broad perspective. So you already had the formal education programs, the seminars, the executive education, the certificate programs that we can offer. So you have a training, and that is basically, so training and seminars and also your education that you receive from the university. This will always be an important block in the middle. That is important, that is giving you the basis. And then building on this basis, you further develop. So the important message here is not to, this is not important and we have different formats, but the important message is, this is your building block. And then on top, we need different formats. And that is, for example, reflection. You had that feedback. So responding to feedback, addressing feedback, learning from feedback. So also teaching at CalU, we do have student evaluations that we receive at the end of every course. We get them, and for me personally, this is one of my most important sources for learning. So I read them, I try to understand them, I try to understand what to improve. And it's really important because my lectures are for my students and they should help my students to learn. So catering to their needs is a very important thing. So reflection is very important. Then also on the job training, job experience, job enlargement, job rotation, lateral moves, temporary assignments. Coming back to the Corona situation, online teaching in the first weeks was definitely on the job training because we directly delved into it and we directly applied it, and we also exchanged. So also among the professors, we exchanged, we discussed, okay, what is working, what is not so well working, how can we improve the things? So really doing this in the same time. E-learning is definitely increasing in importance. We already experienced this at the university, but we also see it in organizations. So also for you, the capability and the understanding for learning online is also something that you will need later on in your work life. So it's not only the new skills that we learn, but also for the students, I think it's a really, in a way, it's a very positive experience because you have both worlds. You have the online learning and you have the offline learning. And so you have a broader experience. And then finally, I would also like to highlight very holistic approaches. So the learning cultures, the growth that we have to be really focused on developing and that we continuously increase our knowledge. Also error management, which basically means that we learn from mistakes. So this is already important for students because we already need to make the mistakes. Therefore, we also do, for example, the exercises. We ask our students to solve cases because you need to understand, to learn by yourself and making errors, making mistakes, and then afterwards understanding, okay, why was this wrong, is a very important step of learning. And you will never forget these things. And it's much more deeper learning. And with that, I'm coming to the important changes that we have. So coming from instructor-centered learning, and I already mentioned that, coming to the learner-centered. So being really focused on our students' needs, on what they need. And that is basically not only important for organizations, but at the same time also for universities. And with that, I am coming as soon as my remote control allows me to do so. So with that, I'm coming to a very last example of working out loud, which is basically currently, so it won the New Work Award 2019 from XING by a very traditional organization, Bosch. And the whole idea is that you're having a couple of people, so you're working with 4 or 5 people, you're setting a goal, you work together 12 weeks, you're setting the goal, and then by social learning, by your commitment, you learn to develop. So this is a very different format. So just to give you a very short glimpse on it, this is a very new format that you will have later on in your work life. And in the same way, also coming back to teaching at CalU, we have the group work, because we know that this is very helpful to keep up your concentration and to work together, and also a very important experience for later on. And with that, I would like to ask you what you think are current trends in learning, and that was actually, or do we want to go directly to the Q&A, Nicole? Is it okay?
I think it'd definitely be interesting to hear what people think are current trends in learning. So I would encourage everyone in the audience to please use the Mentimeter. This is the final time we'll be using it for today, and then we'll jump right into the Q&A, but definitely feel free to share what you think are current trends in learning. I think last time I read that title, I added online already to it as a little Freudian slip there. But yeah, definitely feel free to share. And just a note as well too, I think somebody actually just did that. There is 3 different options that you could put stuff into, but you of course don't need to put it into all 3. If you just have one thing on the top of your mind right now, then feel free to use the one and submit the one that you have.
And things are flying into. And so, thank you very much for answering. So we do have very specific things, but they're all circling around. So with the digital tools, so we have on the one hand, we have the online digital tools, which is also included in the blended learning. But you also see flipped classroom, debate, learning by explaining interactions. And that is also the important part about learning. So giving lectures, that does not any longer mean that I'm standing there 3 hours and just talking and just explaining, but learning really means to interact, to discuss, to debate, to interact with each other, to do exercises, because we know that this is the deepest way that you can learn. So I'm very happy to see these, and it's still working. And so learning is changing, and we try to also do the changes with the interactive classes. And I know that we are running a little bit in time. That is why I'm speeding a little bit up, if you may have noticed that, but I don't want to interrupt while you're still answering. And it's still working. So thank you very much for participating so actively. So just as a very short read up, coming back to our learning objectives. So we talked about the relevance of learning and development, so performance, also implicit knowledge, the transfer of implicit knowledge, and the third one was to accompany the changes in an organization. We talked about the learning formats coming from training, but then also going to reflection, going to all the different formats. And then in the end, you also identified the current trends in learning in terms of, on the one hand, online, and on the other hand, also the interactive learning in discussing and debating things. And with that, I would like to hand over to Nicole.